Okay, welcome back. Hour number 2. And joining us tonight is Bill Deagle. Dr. Deagle, of course, is the man who continues to tell it straight, like we do here. And all of you folks, I think, understand exactly what's going on in terms of Fukushima far better than 99.99% of the American public. We're going to bring you up to date on that tonight in this hour and more. So let's, with that, say hello, Bill.
Yes, things are moving along, and I wish I could give good news, and we can give a little dark humor, but we can't give good news. The good news is basically buried under the debris pile of the nuclear waste site called Fukushima, where they say in a decade the radiation will be gone. And I'm thinking, this isn't wishful thinking. This is not even science, because you know the half-life of these isotopes unless you expose them to a Tesla-styled nuclear decay reaction special field that he described back 80 years ago. These are going to stay around. The shorter life isotopes will be around 200 to 500 years, and the longer ones will be around 100,000.
Right.
So this idea that it's going to be gone in a decade, and they forget about a very important thing called the nuclear Chinese water torture, which means it bioaccumulates, like the nori seaweed south of the southern islands in Japan. And we also forget another thing, that the Humboldt current connects to all the other currents that go to all the oceans. And in 2.5 years, this radiation from Fukushima Daiichi will have spread to every ocean, including the northern and southern hemisphere on the planet.
Correct. Meantime, the Washington Post and others, the so-called mainstream media.
How about the lame brain media?
The lame brain media. They continue to. It's more than lie. They're actually aiding and abetting genocide. They're calling the Fukushima cataclysm. We don't have a word to adequately describe. It's unprecedented in human history. They're calling it a mess and non-catastrophic.
Oh my God.
This is beyond negligent. This is out and out lying, out and out accessory to murder, mass murder. They're lying. It's beyond lying. Anyway,
new crime called the accessory to omnicide.
That's good. That's good. Yep. Meanwhile, the lame excuse for a government in Japan and their TEPCO controllers are announcing they're going to build a 100-foot deep wall all around Fukushima to prevent contamination of the countryside, etc. Now, they say that, and on the same day that TEPCO admits they're going to begin to discharge 1,000 tons of radioactive water a day into the Pacific. They're just not stopping.
Yeah, and the amount of debris that's been burned in these high-temperature furnaces all over Japan is mind-boggling. We're talking about hundreds of millions of tons. And the first debris, of course, arrived in Alaska. Basically, I think it was a soccer ball. And, of course, they think they've tracked it down to the individual schools. So you can imagine that if a soccer ball is there were bodies, body parts, boats, all kinds of And people think, well, they're not radioactive when they get to the Alaska or the British Columbia or the Washington, Oregon, or California coast. Not. Those radioisotope molecules don't care if they're sitting in the Fukushima Daiichi cooling chamber or a nuclear reactor, or they're sitting on a boat on the other side of the Pacific. If they have a half-life of hundreds of years, they're still there.
Or going up the nearest incinerator chimney in Tokyo or Yokohama or Fukushima City. It doesn't matter. All Japan cities use furnaces and chimneys to burn their garbage. They're basically just trash burning facilities.
The simple solution the Japanese believe is the solution to pollution is dilution.
Right.
But the world is not Japan's toilet. Pretty bad.
Well, that's what they're doing. They're literally flushing their death into the oceans. And let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, besides Senator Ron Wyden, who just last week saw the light after a year, what other American politician has ever stepped forward to suggest that this country, was completely covered with radioactive hot particles and is continuing to this day to be dosed with it, whether it comes over in the jet stream or into the local moisture barrier and vapor along the coast and then down onto the land, whether it gets absorbed in the middle of the ocean or any other part of the ocean up into the clouds and brought over here and dumped as rain in the lower level currents. It's all mind-boggling. It gets here and nobody says a word. Nothing.
Well, the most remarkable thing is we hear all kinds of information. And when I talk to people that listen to my show over the NutriMedical Report in Genesis, or when I talk to do consults to doctors and patients all the time, and I've been working on developing anti-radiation nutraceuticals for 39 years. Now, the first project I was involved was 1973, assisting colleagues of mine working on a PhD project to expose small fruit flies and small animals to radiation and see if we can protect them with special nutraceuticals and or drugs to protect against DNA damage, adducts, and death. Wow. And that project went back to 1973 at Dalhousie University, where I was doing my biochemistry and marine bacteriology research. I finished my PhD research project in 5 months. My grandfather was dying of diabetes and asked me to switch and go into medicine, so I didn't write the thesis, but I finished the project. When I assisted this project, it was basically an offshore project for the U.S. military to try to test for the use of things so they could do a military operation, boots on the ground, within 48 hours of a nuclear war, not 2 weeks, which is what would happen for any other military operation.
Right.
And they succeeded. Now, I have posted up on my website radiation protection protocols, and I can tell people this is not optional anymore. If you are not taking diatomic iodine, Nutridyne, you're not taking long-acting alpha-lipoic acid, you're not taking anhydrous catechins and things like cell detox glutathione, you're crazy, because this radiation, and I got to explain this to you without getting into the quantum mechanics, all radiation, whether it's alpha particles, which is, a combination of 2 protons and 2 neutrons, the electrons or beta particles that are emitted, or gamma rays, which are high energy particle, it either knocks an electron off molecules in your body, or it absorbs the electrons, but basically it sucks electrons off tissues. When you suck an electron, what it does is it drops what's called the transmembrane potential. Now, the life force in your body can be measured by a thing called bioimpedance. And so, while the Earth's magnetic field is dropping, which is necessary for life, as soon as you get exposed to radiation, the first thing that happens is your bioimpedance drops, and your transmembrane potential, which drives all the energy, it's like your batteries in your cells and tissues, drops. So every illness, not just 1 or 2 illnesses like cancer, go up. Birth defects, dementia, heart disease, trisomics, which are the primary thing that happens. Trisomics kill 95% of spontaneous miscarriages in all mammals. Trisomy 13, 18, and 21. 13 is completely lethal. 18 might survive 6 to 8 weeks. Bella Centorum's daughter is a miracle to live 3 years. Trisomy 21 we call Downs, which can be the full gene or a translocation of the CQ21-22 long arm. Now, there's 5 genes that cause Down syndrome. 5 genes, okay? I did all the research with it with a Canadian government grant and researchers about 16, 17 years ago. Now, this is an optional. People need to know you can't just take a few extra vitamins that you get on the VitaCost, or you can't just figure I'm going to be on a good diet. Even if you're a vegan and you think, well, I'm not going to eat that food that's going to higher up in the food chain, you should never buy fish unless you take your radiation detector to the fish store, especially if it comes from the Pacific. You're asking for it. And a year or 2 from now, whatever radiation levels there, especially strontium and cesium, are going to be bioaccumulated. Now, people need to understand strontium is a radioisotope analog of calcium, and cesium is a radioisotope analog of potassium. They're pretty important for life. Potassium and magnesium. And if you have a radioisotope, you're going to suck the electrons out of your cell membranes. You're going to drop the transmembrane potential, and the life force literally right out of any living thing.
Now, what Bill is saying is that these take the place of normal elements in your body and begin to degrade and destroy it.
And basically all radiation. Doesn't matter what type it is. It can be, neutrons. They're emitting, like we call neutron waves, like a neutron bomb. It can be electrons. They basically displace electrons or absorb them. And when they do that, they create what's called an acid or a positive charge. So the tissues become acidotic, hypoxic. You release what's called methyl groups, so it uncovers DNA or switches on or off genes. And basically cancer is a dysmethylation where methyl groups, called histone methyl groups, are ripped off the DNA and it no longer has proper control. Now, the government knows this. They know. The estimates were that after the last 25 years, and it's coming up to the anniversary of Chernobyl on the 29th, that it was estimated that over the next 25 years, 4 million people will die in excess caused by Chernobyl. Chernobyl is like a firecracker compared to a smart bomb. This is a big deal. And it's not just one graphite reactor blowing and then the radiation stops.
A brand new one at that, without a huge...
This is just going on and on.
There was no big spent fuel pool at Chernobyl.
No.
We've got
something that keeps on giving, It's like this is like a nuclear derivative and quarterly dividends. We're getting radioactive dividends to the planet.
I don't know how long Daiichi was in operation, but at least 25 years. And that's 25 years full of spent nuclear fuel there. Remember, and it's enriched after it's used, basically.
All the plants are on the...
Every one.
500-some plants all over the world. They don't move the debris. They store it on site.
And it keeps on giving for 1 million years. 40 years of electricity and 1 million years of death you have to maintain. Yeah. How smart. How
still
brilliant.
Be radioactive when the interstellar architects and archaeologists come to discover what happened to our civilization.
It will. Yeah, actually will be. All right. Hold on. Be right back with Dr. Bill in just a minute. Okay, now, take a listen to this. I mentioned in the last segment how much water is being dumped into the ocean. We don't know how much water we'll never know how much deadly water TEPCO has poured into the great Pacific Ocean, which is trash now. Believe me, it is only going to get worse and worse. Eventually, the government will have to begin to make announcements admitting it. Here are a couple of footnotes. As long ago as last October 20th, 2011, Asahi reported massive amounts of groundwater flowing constantly into reactors 1, 2, 3, and 4. This yielded contaminated radioactive waters, and they were up 40% just since June. In other words, the reactors were cracked and open, and the groundwater was pouring in there. There's a lot of groundwater there. Kyoto reported that groundwater now flowing into Fukushima, into the buildings, via cracks in the walls, was up to 500 tons a day. This is in September. So now, TEPCO announces it's going to get rid of that groundwater flowing into the reactor buildings because the groundwater is being turned into deadly radioactive. Well, it's a killer, folks. Here's what they say. TEPCO aims to cut in half the amount of groundwater flowing into the reactor buildings by building about a dozen pumping wells. Right? Wells. They're going to pump the water out, try to keep it from going in and building up. They want to use these wells to direct part, they say, BS, of the groundwater into the Pacific Ocean, likely to be about 1,000 tons per day of deadly radioactive water. So TEPCO says it's going to check the contamination level of the groundwater before releasing into the ocean. Right. We really trust them, don't we?
Why don't we have a lawsuit by the International Court of Justice?
Why don't we? Why don't we have an
action to say this
stop.
Is a crime against the planet?
You'll stop right now. You'll stop burning this stuff. You'll stop pumping water into the ocean. You will stop. You will take care of the problem. You will stop killing the planet. You will stop killing the ocean.
And by the way, as a codicil to this, we need to start filing suits against every nation that has a old-style nuclear reactor they're trying to relicense. Any nation that has a nuclear reactor, either a fault line, a tsunami zone, or a subduction zone, or a thrust zone like the San Jacinto thrust zone right off of San Onofre. And I just had some further discussions. Last week we had a nuclear engineer on who goes by Chris Harris. That's not his real name. He's an NRC nuclear specialist on our Thursday show, Hour 3.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is that there was a design change that they made, they called which it wasn't where they changed the number of tubes, the tube design, and so on. And the tube design has always been faulty. It's always been venting off radioactive tritium and other isotopes. It's always been...
So everybody who's driven by San Onofre with the normal on-show floor of moisture and air was basically being exposed.
Well, the problem is, you see, they've admitted that 75% of all nuclear reactors vent off tritium.
Every day.
But when you have a steam turbine generator, it generates a lot more. And these steam turbine tubes, they've actually admitted now, I got the documents, admitted that the steam turbine turbine tube assemblies are faulty in design. And lo and behold, also, we know that as soon as there was a what's called a plant shutdown, basically a hot shutdown of the plant. It burned out the tubes really fast, which is why these two new reactor turbines put in at $600 million apiece. They went and checked, and they were going to try to see if they can get reactor 2 going up, because reactor 3 was the one that had more tubes burned out. They realized it was all shot too. So activists here are very concerned. We had yesterday morning a 3.9 earthquake in the San Jacinto upthrust zone right off of San Onofre. That's within 5 miles. 3.9.
So we'll call it a 4.
Yeah.
Why not? So San Jacinto 4.0. All right. And what do you think? What do you think what's the actual benchmark where we have to be concerned about before there's major damage to San Onofre, which could lead to some kind of a crisis?
I'd say 6.5 to 7, and you're really, really screwed.
Okay.
And the thing is, they've said they expect a 7 to 9 plus earthquake. There's, quote, a potential. This is the actual nuclear experts and the earthquake experts saying on public sites, the San Jacinto upthrust zone has a potential for a 7 to 9 plus earthquake, which will totally destroy any reactor containment and these high pressure steam turbines. So nobody here is in the right mind wants it to come back online, even though 19% of power comes from there. They need to permanently shut it down. And also Diablo Canyon and any other of the reactors, and by the way, 3/4 of the reactors in America are sitting within what's called a strike zone
of earthquakes. Yeah.
3/4.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot. 75 plus sitting, and if you look worldwide, 5 of the major reactors in Switzerland, which is why they're shutting them all down, 5 of them all sit near fault zones, and they have big earthquakes in Switzerland. People don't know that. They think, well, it's the mountains. There's no earthquakes. There's fault lines all over Switzerland. So they have common sense. They say, bad idea, let's shut them down. And the Germans, too, they actually have 2 clues.
Well, it's funny how Japan is getting by now with no nuclear power at all. Gosh, I wonder if they could have done it from the beginning.
They need to rev up, because the Japanese are very smart and inventive, and stop being passive. They should set up the first geothermal right here, for example, in Temecula, California. They need to get to what's called wave turbines, geothermal energy. Right on the coast, there's lots of wind energy. There's no excuse that we're dealing with nuclear reactors.
Let's cut to the chase and go with Stanley Meyer.
Exactly, Stanley Meyer, or energy from the vacuum.
That's right.
Nikola Tesla, where he had these tubes in the Pierce Arrow car tuned to drive at 90 miles an hour around the city with no gasoline engine.
Now, when we come back, tell us more about that. That's fascinating. Pierce Arrow was the name of an automobile in the early part of the last century, which was actually a very popular car. Talk to us about that a little bit more, if you would, in just a couple minutes, Bill. We'll be right back.
We'll be back in a moment.
Okay, and we're back with Dr. Bill. By the way, when is the last time you saw the EPA, ladies and gentlemen, post results of testing so much as one fish from the Gulf of Alaska fishery or the Pacific Ocean in terms of cesium contamination? No, you haven't. There hasn't been any. There hasn't been one.
They are AWOL, absolutely.
Well, it was worse than that. They're again criminally involved with omnicide. I agree. That's your word. That's perfect. Now,
yeah, exactly. In fact, a couple of quick announcements. We're putting up a bunch of new detectors. The new form of the Inspector, I have the Inspector Plus, has a new attachment now. So we have the Inspector EXP, which has a separate radiation detector handle you can bring around. We also have a special at our website, NutriMedical, for no shipping charges for 2 NIOSH N95 masks, 2 diatomic Nutridyne, 1 Nutritrol long-acting, and 1 anhydrous catechin NutriDefense I've designed years ago. And I knew this was coming because I knew the stupidity of
sooner or later, yeah.
Yeah, and sooner or later. I took care of employees at the Savannah River plant, the one that makes the MOX fuel pellets. when I worked in Georgia. I worked in Central Illinois at the reactors there. I took care of employees on this Rocky Flats facility. And in fact, they tried to move liquid radioactive waste off the facility without proper certification. So the state troopers asked for their bill of lading and the radiation detectors, and it was 90,000 times more radioactive than they're allowed on the 93 freeway. So people need to realize that every day accidents happen. Nobody talks. Radiation was released from plants like the Savannah River plant, and when they told us in the emergency department in 1987, we had a briefing right from our director of the emergency and the people at the Savannah River plant that make the most radioactive plutonium pellets in America. Don't talk to the media. Don't do this. Don't do that. This is the same thing with the plant that makes aspartame right there in Savannah, right there across in South Carolina, because we took care of their employees as well, where they're making E. coli, which is stool bacteria, and they transgenically put in the genes to create the peptide that makes aspartame. So you're basically eating a byproduct of feces bacteria was genetically engineered to create this tripeptide. And by the way, it's not phenylalanine that's toxic. They always try to confuse people. It's a tripeptide that converts to diketopiperazine, methyl alcohol, and formaldehyde. And it forms DNA adducts. DKP,
the diketopiperazine, is a known brain tumor causal agent.
In fact, in 1978, I was reviewing with Dr. Olney to do a neuropathology residency at UC University of St. Louis, the Washington State University in St. Louis, and he told me he was doing the FDA studies and said in his nerve growth experiments, because he had the only lab outside Japan that could grow nerve cells, that he could see on scanning electron microscopy clumping of the chromatin, which was identical to the changes occurring that form multicentric astrogliomas, the most aggressive tumor you can get. And he predicted and told me this in 1978. He told me in the spring by phone, and I interviewed him since on my show, okay, he's retired now, that he predicted a 10 to 20% increase in all cancers, dementia, and autism in the next 20 years, in all age groups.
Wow.
And he just said it out of the hat. He didn't have statistics or reason. He said, this is going to cause cancer. This is going to induce cancer. Now when we add the radioisotopes, we're going to see the Alzheimer units fill up. And by the way, when Obamacare comes in, you need to know this out there in the public.
Oh, yeah. Pay attention to this.
If you think socialized medicine is bad in the UK, under National Health Service, or in Canada or Australia, we have half the survival if you have the same health condition as you do in America with private health care. Everything over 75 years of age goes to a ethics panel.
This is true, folks. This is like out of a movie.
If you need a stent, a dialysis, if you need a clip on aneurysm in your head and you can't wait for the committee because they're not going to meet till Monday, but it's Saturday night, they let you die. Now, this is already happening because they're changing hospital policy based on Obamacare and the usurper-in-chief in this damn law. So I have doctors panic calling me all the time, including Dr. Adam Doran. The America's Medical Society is having a meeting next weekend in San Diego talking about this. And I have neurosurgeons I've talked to, orthopedic surgeons, anesthesiologists, completely, and I'm talking about completely freaked out by this.
Well, they're still thinking a little bit then.
Oh, no, the doctors are if they're within 5 years of retirement, they're leaving. They're going to go and learn basket weaving and golf and buy an island or go off to Costa Rica. They're just like, they've had it.
Right.
They're like major burnt out.
Yeah.
And they don't want to leave their patients. The reason why doctors don't live as long as even their patients. The average male doctor lives to be 55 in America.
What?
You know that?
That's
55.
it?
55.
Heart attack?
Heart attack, stroke, you name it, they get it.
Huh.
The reason is doctors work themselves to death and they take on all the stress. And the biggest stress isn't dealing with sick patients or dying patients. It's dealing with government, insurance carriers, and denied care, where they try to make you the proxy to murder your patients by denying innovative care, alternative care, better care, even care that it's available, but the insurance carrier won't provide it in a timely manner. That's what's stress. And we can do it cheaper, too. Medicine is top-heavy with stupid expenses and stupid oversight and stupid coding and stupid prevention of new innovative treatments that could prevent all kinds of dangerous things. Like last year, or actually from the statistics the year before, there were over 5,500 deaths just due to Medicare patients only, not including other insurance carriers, dying as complications of a total knee replacement. And 184,000 complications requiring hospitalization.
From knee?
Just from one knee. And just Medicare patients. Not including other insurance carriers like Blue Cross, Blue Shield, or anything else.
That's unacceptable.
It's murder. Well,
they're also admitting now and finding out, we've done programs on this in the past, not you and I, but other people, that these joints, I don't care what they're made of, doesn't matter, titanium, ceramic. That's right.
You get particle disease.
That's right.
By the way, it doesn't just stop in your little local joint if you do an autopsy.
No. It goes everywhere.
It goes to your lymphatics everywhere. You can see it in the hiatus of their lung. You can see it in the blood-brain barrier in their brain. You can see it in their kidneys.
Well, they're nano-sized particles and up.
Yeah.
It's as small as they can be, and they move up from there. And they go everywhere where the actual aperture of the capillary will allow them to go, or whatever. They go in. And
by the way, when these things get in there, just like when you get a silicone breast implant, and it blocks the blood-brain barrier, you get an interesting syndrome called normal pressure hydrocephalus. And the way you tell is you see people starting to act demented, and you do a CT scan, you see their ventricles enlarging.
Wait a minute. Run that by me again. You get it. Okay, women, breast enlargements are huge businesses in this country.
Right. When you get silicone that bursts and it gets into their bloodstream, it ends up in the blood-brain barrier. It also gets against the normal exit areas because there's a circulatory system in the ventricles of the brain and the cerebrospinal fluid, and it blocks it. So you end up with what's called normal pressure hydrocephalus.
Wow.
When the ventricles expand and you get a syrinx to the spinal cord.
Well,
and they know this, and the same thing happens with this particle disease for joint replacement.
Well, the particle disease is one of the big secret now. It's not being talked about.
It's a big secret because they're all going to get sued for billions.
Oh, yeah.
The lawyers are just smacking like wolves.
This is not a joke, folks. If you're thinking about a knee or a joint replacement, hip, knee, doesn't matter.
Get pulse magnetic field. We have the big Kahuna machine on our website. We also have a new machine called Metathera. You can use nutraceuticals to regenerate. For God's sake, don't do a joint replacement, especially of your knee.
Well, I was supposed to have one 24 years ago, and I said no. I had 4 surgeries.
Pulse magnetic field, hyperbaric oxygen, and the right nutraceuticals. If you got a knee replacement, you would not even be a blithering idiot right now, Jeff. You would be in a hospital or dead. Yeah,
agreed. Well, I knew there was some voice that said no more, and I said nope.
That voice was the voice of your higher self.
Yeah, I went in. I listen, this is a quick story. We'll take our break. I went in and had just to see what was going on in there because I can hardly walk some days. It's really bad. It's not pleasant. And the guy took the x-ray, the orthopedic surgeon, and I went in the office and sat down. He brought the x-ray and he put it in the light box. I don't know what you call that, but he threw the x-ray up there. And he turned and looked at me. He didn't look at the x-ray. He didn't explain anything. He just sat and looked at me. And I said, well? And without looking at the x-ray at all, he looked at me and he said, it doesn't get any worse. How are you walking? And I said, because I want to. And I said, I'm not. He said, that needs to be replaced tomorrow. I said, well, it was supposed to be replaced 23 years ago. I said, no, I'm not having it done. I just wanted to see what was going on, and thank you very much. And I took the picture, and I left.
Well, you know what they're doing in UC Colorado for the last 15 years? Have been growing cartilage in the lab, putting cartilage transplants in the joints, and then regrowing it.
Well, I wish it was just that in my case. It's worse, but anyway.
Even if it's worse, believe it or not, there's always a rim of cartilage on the outside of the connective tissues, and if you put the right nutrients and pulse magnetic in there, and put a hydroviscous layer of Hyland, in many cases, it'll regenerate over the next 6 months or a year with energetics and the right nutraceuticals.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I believe it. All right, hang on, gang. We'll be right back with Dr. Bill in just a minute. Okay, back with Dr. Bill Deagle, talking about things that are going to impact you, whether you like it or not. Another thing that Michael Collins down at EnviroReporter.com found, other than the levels of cesium, we'll assume it's cesium, radioactive readings, counts per minute in the nori, the seaweed from southern Japan, have doubled in a year. Other than that, he is finding out and realizing, and we've talked about this on this program, that anybody who lives near the ocean knows full well that there's what they call a damp, moist marine air layer. What that basically is micro aerosolized droplets of seawater that the wave action creates. It's a big blanket, a big dense blanket of wetness and moisture that covers the entire inland area. Could be miles and miles near the ocean. Now, all of that in time is eventually going to become not high level necessarily, but certainly a vector of spreading radioactivity onto the land within, well, whatever the ocean plane is where the water and the shore meets. This is going to happen. It's already happening in some places in lower levels, but in another year or two, the current activity will have brought that much 1,000 tons a day, ladies and gentlemen. TEPCO is admitting that they're going to be pumping into the ocean, and nobody's saying diddly about it. Nothing.
It's quite remarkable, isn't it? Now, what happens to the body when you don't do these things? Well, the people that go on and try to pretend like the Japanese that it's fine to let children go back to nearby prefectures, or people in America, other than Senator Wyden, that basically think, well, Jeff Rense is wrong, and Byron O'Corder is wrong, and all your other reporters, and my nuclear expert, Chris Harris, is wrong, and Deagle's wrong, that no, you don't need to worry. You can go buy your veggies or your strawberries or eat your fish from the Pacific Ocean, and everything's fine. You don't need a radiation detector. You don't need to take diatomic iodine, or even something as simple as a good, powerful probiotic will pull up to 85% of strontium cesium in your gut.
How interesting.
And the thing is, if there's an increase in surge, and which happens a lot of time, we should be having, this is what we should have, just like I laid out what we should do at Fukushima, not build a wall now 100 feet around it. They should have built a moat around it, or multiple moats. They should have put multi-layer tents with
just a little late.
Right. What they should have done is built tents over each facility. They're made with spider silk and Kevlar. They should have put a seawall around the outside facility. They should have had buckyball as well as carbon and other types of filters. They should have taken the debris and had a double-walled hulled ship to take away the radioactive water and pump it into a facility where they can actually totally just get rid of it. Instead, they're letting it seep out of the ocean. They talk about putting thousands of square miles literally of the bottom of the ocean turned to concrete, which just seals it further, which means it's going to push further out into the ocean floor. It's not going to stop it. It's just going to continue to seep further out, and it just delays it. So here's what will happen. I'm just going to predict in the next 10 years. If we continue doing nothing, we have a do-nothing president now. We're either going to have Romney, by the way, and I want to get a little humor here because this is bizarre, but it's true. Have you ever heard of the white horse prophecy?
No.
No. Well, this is one on, and you're a wizard of news, but I want to throw this one out because I think people will say, no, Dr. Deagle, that's not true. Well, there's a prophecy by Joseph Smith that at the time of the end of America, when the Constitution hangs by a thread, that a Mormon will become president and save America and ride in, quote, on a white horse.
Really?
In the United States. Yeah. They have a copy of the White House Oval Office in the Washington, D.C. temple.
Huh.
An exact copy of the layout of the Oval Office.
Looks like they're about to achieve their prophecy.
It is. Now, we have two choices here, actually maybe three, and they're all not good. If we have Sheriff Joe Arpaio, if they actually remove the Abominator, we may be left with Hillary, Rodham, Shipton, demonically possessed.
It's not human.
Inhuman Clinton. Or we may get what I call Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde flip Hananiah Romney.
Yeah.
Who you don't know which Romney you're going to get. Are you going to get the nice Romney that starts Cookie Gate, where he accuses someone of not making homemade cookies? Or are you going to get the Romney who's... Are you going to get the Romney that's going to give $50 or no copay at all abortions? What do you get? The Romney care, this is why it's going to be a joke as we come to June here in 2 months, when the Supreme Court's got to deal with this issue of Obamacare, which is just euthanasia, plus the IRS on steroids. And it's a move toward a totalitarian regime that's taken right out of the pages of the Soviet Union. This is the Sovietization of America.
True.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So Obama and Romney, I want to see the debate, because the first thing that Obama's going to say is, we used Romney care in your state as the basis for Obamacare. And in fact, their mandate that they had was actually a GOP recommendation. It wasn't a Democrat, believe it or not. People want to blame all the Democrats are all bad. Yes, they're bad, But guess what? That bad idea was one that was originally Republican.
Interesting. I wonder if they'll even have a debate.
I don't think it'll all be ridiculous.
No, it'll have to be scripted. He'll have to have a teleprompter. They won't let that guy go out there and swing in the wind and try and speak extemporaneously. It's not going to happen.
Well, you see, we can sign. I learned as a doctor how to be able to pick up signs of organic brain damage, and the way we call sans teleprompter Obama speaks, you can tell that the man has had some significant what we call blow. He's blown a few neurons.
No, there's been a real diminution there. You can see it.
Right, and then the second thing with Romney, we can see someone who is basically an Asperger's who just happened to have a rich dad.
Well, he never met a...
He's got Asperger's autism, which is why you don't know what kind of Romney you have, but he's very rigid, very stiff. You really say, well, is he real or is he an animatronic simulation?
He never met a pair of boots he didn't want to lick. This is this guy is so two-faced. It's a two-faced joke. It's the face of the day. It doesn't matter.
Well, I think what's real is I learned how to recognize what I call Asperger's syndrome, and I can tell you Romney has a form of Asperger's autism.
What, define Asperger's.
Asperger's syndrome is people that actually have to study how to simulate being a human being rather than spontaneously being one.
I like that. That's good. That's good. Well, we're going to get Romney. You look at Obama's body language. He's been told. He's out. He's done. You can see
we have a choice of Hillary Clinton, Shipton, Satanist, powered by the devil, Lilith herself.
True.
If we replace the Abominator, or we have the choice, the satanic choice of Romneycide. The only thing that will make Romney acceptable, and it's possible, is if he makes an open deal that we have Rick Santorum as the head of the Attorney General so we can get the personhood issue dealt with. So, for example, if a killer kills a woman with a gunshot and the baby survives in the intensive care nursery, that baby has inheritable rights by the Supreme Court that have never been overturned by the Supreme Court. Yet, the so-called Roe versus Wade can take away that personhood because it's not wanted. So even at birth or right up to birth, that child could be killed, which means it's fallacious logic to think we don't have laws on the books that would make the Roe versus Wade gone, period. Number one. Number two, we need to have Ron Paul, who never wanted to be president, he wanted to get rid of the Fed. We need to make him the head of the Fed. We need to make Newt Gingrich, who actually has two clues, if you point him in the right direction, to be the Secretary of State, because he would not want to push the red button. Okay? And he would not do what Hillary Clinton's doing, which is saying, go for social network, go and put the caliphate from Morocco all the way to Indonesia, and by all means have a thermonuclear war in the Middle East because it's good for business. That's what Hillary wants to do.
She's amazing, that one.
She's amazingly crazy. Yeah. When you see her cheering about the steel rod shoved up inside Muammar Gaddafi, I think the woman was having a psychic orgasm.
Might have.
I really thought, oh my God, this woman has seen a few ritual sacrifices too many.
Just a few. I guess the only question remains, are they going to let Barkey go through the election and quote, lose, or are they going to dump him beforehand? If Sheriff Joe has his way, Joe will get him out. I don't know.
I call this the shrimp's dilemma. It's the dialogue between the chef and the shrimp. And the shrimp can be told, you can be flambéed, you can be sautéed, or you can be boiled. But either way, you're going to get cooked. And that's what's going to be the electorate, the public, the people. We're going to have a choice of, do you want Obama, another term of the Marxist, fascist, corporatist puppet of Soros Geppetto? Do you want Romneycide, where you've got a high-level Mormon, who the Mormon Church are totally puppets of the Rothschilds? People need to understand this.
We've been trying to make that point.
Yeah, it's very important to understand this. The Rothschilds own lock, stock, and barrel of Mormons. They made some very bad financial decisions in around the 1940s. They went under financially, and the Rothschilds bailed them out, and they have their claws deep into the structure of the high-level Mormons.
Well, this is how they do it. Bernard Baruch owned Winston Churchill in the last century, and they just get behind people, and they buy them up.
And the average Mormon is basically well-meaning. Only half of Mormons have even read the Book of Mormon. They don't read Bruce McConkie's Mormon doctrine. They don't know anything, basically. And only 5% of Mormons even have what the church recommends for food supplies. Although most of the food supply companies, they'll have non-radioactive food stored in massive amounts, are mostly Mormon. And it says that in this prophecy, by the way, it says that, and you can look it up on Wikipedia if you don't believe me. It said, no, Deagle.
It's called the White Horse Prophecy.
It's called the White Horse Prophecy. If you want, I'll link and I'll send you the documents, but it's quite shocking. And if you look at it, it's like, man, that I seem to recall something that in the Bible says, and he would ride forth on a white horse, conquering and to conquer. I'm thinking, that sounds awfully damn familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can say this tongue-in-cheek, but not really, that whoever we get as the next president is going to be a bad guy or bad woman. And there's two major leaders we need to watch on the planet. And a lot of people are cheering for Mr. Putin or Medvedev and the Russians. They're not our buddies, and neither is the president. Whoever is going to come next. But whoever's next will be a false prophet for what's going to happen to America and the whole world. And they better pay attention. Because what's going on, we have no action about Fukushima, no action about the meltdown in Europe. We just give them more billions and trillions of dollars. We have no action on people, the meltdown of the middle class. I wonder why housing prices aren't coming back. How about no jobs? So, as I say, the lame brain media is still out there, snorting cocaine in a heroin stupor, and of course led by a president who's burned out too many brain cells with dope.
Yeah, all
and
true.
We wonder why we're going to hell in a handcart.
And there's people who keep talking about recovery and reversal and housing returning. No, folks, it doesn't work that way. Not going back.
The body politic of America, rigor mortis is setting in.
I agree. I know my house lost 20% of its assessed value last year. It'll lose another 20% this year, and so will everybody else. That's just the way the game
soon
is
the dollar
designed.
will be worth a penny.
Yeah, damn near. Thank you, Bill. Always.
Take care, everybody.
All right.
The only hope is to stay funny in this, prepare for whatever's coming, and do a lot of prayer.
Indeed. All right.
Take care.
Be well. All right. Dr. Bill Deagle. Okay, that's hour 2. We'll pause and come right back.